Picture this. You're minding your own business in a grocery store line when some entitled teenager shoves past you and says, "Well, you weren't fast enough." What would you do? My wife showed this kid exactly what happens when you mess with the wrong mom. What she did next was absolutely brilliant. If you've ever fantasized about the perfect comeback to rude behavior, smash that subscribe button right now. Hit like if you're ready for some sweet, sweet justice, and drop a comment telling me about your own revenge stories. Trust me, you're going to love this one. Let's dive in. So this story takes place on what should have been a completely ordinary Tuesday afternoon. My wife Sarah and our teenage son decided to make a quick run to the local supermarket. Nothing fancy. They just needed to grab a handful of items. You know the kind of trip. Milk, bread, maybe some snacks. The kind of shopping where you don't even bother with a cart because everything fits comfortably in your arms. When they walked into the store, Sarah immediately noticed something that anyone who's ever set foot in a grocery store knows all too well. Those dreaded long lines at the regular checkout counters. You know the scene. Carts backed up like rush hour traffic, cashiers moving at the speed of molasses, and that one customer ahead of you who's apparently buying enough groceries to survive the apocalypse. Sarah looked at their small handful of items, then at those intimidating lines, and made the logical choice that millions of shoppers make every day. She headed straight for the self-checkout area. Now, this particular store had a pretty standard setup. 4 self-checkout machines arranged in a neat little row with one single line feeding into all of them. It's actually a pretty efficient system when people follow the basic rules of human decency. The line wasn't even that bad when they joined it. Maybe 2 or 3 people ahead of them. Nothing to write home about. But here's the thing about grocery stores. They're like magnets for human behavior. Within minutes, what started as a short, manageable line had grown into a snake of about 10 people, all holding their various items, all patiently waiting their turn. Sarah and her son found themselves in that sweet spot. They'd arrived early enough to be near the front, but late enough that a small crowd had formed behind them. This is where our story takes an interesting turn, because what happened next reveals something fascinating about human nature and the unwritten rules that hold our society together. Their turn finally arrived. Sarah stepped forward toward the available self-checkout machine, her arms full of items, her son beside her. But then, and this is crucial, she got momentarily distracted. We're talking about maybe 4 seconds here. 4 seconds, the kind of brief moment that happens to literally everyone. Maybe she was checking her phone for her shopping list. Maybe she was making sure her son was ready. Maybe she was just taking a breath. 4 measly seconds. Now, in any civilized society, when someone is momentarily distracted like this, what happens? The person behind them gives a gentle nudge, maybe clears their throat, or simply says, "Excuse me, it's your turn." Basic human courtesy, the kind of small interaction that keeps the world spinning smoothly. But not today, not with this couple. Enter our antagonists, a young couple, probably in their late teens or early 20s, the kind of age where you think you know everything about the world, but haven't yet learned the basic art of patience. They saw Sarah's momentary distraction and made a decision that would define the next few minutes of their lives. Without a word, without any attempt at polite communication, they simply pushed past Sarah and her son and claimed the self-checkout machine. Let me paint you a picture of this moment. Imagine you're Sarah. You've been patiently waiting in line, you're next, and suddenly 2 strangers just shove past you in front of your teenage son, in front of 10 other people who all witnessed you waiting patiently for your turn. The audacity is breathtaking. Now, Sarah is generally a peaceful person, the kind of woman who usually lets small slights slide because life's too short to argue with every rude person you encounter. But something about this moment, maybe it was the blatant disrespect, maybe it was the fact that her son was watching, maybe it was just that this was the last straw in a long day. Something made her decide that today was not the day to stay quiet. she called out to them, her voice carrying just enough volume to cut through the ambient grocery store noise. "Excuse me," she said, "do you really think that 10 people behind me are waiting for you to cut past the line?" It was a reasonable question, a fair question, the kind of question that gives someone the opportunity to realize their mistake, apologize, and step back, the kind of question that could have diffused the entire situation. But the young man's response revealed everything you need to know about his character. He turned around, looked Sarah dead in the eye, and with the kind of smug confidence that only comes from youth and ignorance, he said, "Well, you didn't pay enough attention and weren't fast enough." Let that sink in for a moment. This wasn't just rudeness. This was a complete rejection of basic social norms. He was essentially saying that kindness and patience are weaknesses, that consideration for others is stupidity, and that might makes right. Most people, when faced with such breathtaking arrogance, might have escalated into an argument. They might have demanded he move, called for a manager, or started a scene. But Sarah had a different idea entirely. Instead of engaging in a shouting match that would accomplish nothing except ruining everyone's day, she smiled. Not a friendly smile, the kind of smile that chess masters get when they see their opponent walking straight into checkmate. You see, Sarah had noticed something that our young line cutter hadn't. In his rush to claim the self-checkout machine, he'd failed to observe the beautiful mechanics of how these systems work. Each machine is independent, but they're all connected to the same monitoring system. And more importantly, transactions can be easily transferred between machines if you know what you're doing. Sarah calmly walked over to his self-checkout machine, the one he'd stolen from her, and did something absolutely brilliant. She picked up one of her items and casually swiped it on his machine. Just like that. One quick beep, and suddenly his transaction was contaminated with her item. Then, as smooth as silk, she walked over to the next available self-checkout machine and began processing the rest of her items. Now, if you've ever used self-checkout machines, you know exactly what happened next. The young man suddenly found himself in a technological nightmare. His machine was now registering an item he hadn't selected, couldn't pay for, and didn't know how to remove. The system was confused, the machine was beeping, and a queue of increasingly impatient customers was forming behind him. He tried to continue with his transaction, but the machine wouldn't let him proceed. He tried to remove the mysterious item, but didn't know how. He looked around desperately, probably hoping the situation would resolve itself through sheer willpower. Meanwhile, Sarah was methodically scanning her items at the next machine over. Beep, beep, beep. Each sound a perfect note in her symphony of revenge. She was calm, efficient, thorough, the very picture of someone who definitely pays attention and is definitely fast enough. The young man was now stuck. The self-checkout machine had effectively become a very expensive paperweight. He had no choice but to wait for a store clerk to come over and manually cancel the mysterious item that had appeared on his transaction. And here's the beautiful part. Grocery store clerks are busy people. When you need help at self-checkout, you don't just snap your fingers and get immediate service. You wait. You wait while they finish helping other customers. You wait while they deal with more pressing issues. You wait while the very people you cut in front of complete their transactions and head home. Sarah, meanwhile, was already finishing up. Her items were scanned, paid for, and bagged, while her would-be line cutter was still standing there, probably wondering how his brilliant scheme had gone so spectacularly wrong. As Sarah and her son walked toward the exit, groceries in hand and satisfaction in their hearts, they heard a voice calling after them. It was the young man, finally freed from his technological prison by a bemused store clerk. "You're crazy!" he shouted across the store. Sarah paused at the exit, turned around with that same chessmaster smile, and delivered the perfect closing line. "Well, you didn't pay enough attention." And just like that, they walked out into the parking lot, leaving behind one very confused, very humbled young man who had just learned an expensive lesson about patience and courtesy. The beauty of Sarah's revenge wasn't just in its immediate effectiveness, it was in its perfect poetic justice. He had accused her of not paying attention and not being fast enough, so she showed him what happens when someone really doesn't pay attention to what's going on around them. She turned his own words into his downfall. The young man thought he was being clever by pushing past someone who seemed distracted. Instead, he discovered that sometimes the person you're trying to outsmart is actually 10 steps ahead of you. Sarah didn't just get her revenge, she got it with style, with precision, and without stooping to his level of rudeness. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about escalation or anger, it's about using someone's own behavior against them. Sarah turned a moment of disrespect into a teachable moment, and she did it without raising her voice or losing her dignity. So what do you think? Was Sarah's revenge perfectly justified, or did she go too far? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if you've got your own stories of instant karma or clever revenge, I want to hear them. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed this sweet taste of justice, subscribe for more amazing stories, and hit that notification bell so you never miss out on the satisfaction. Until next time, remember, always pay attention.